I hate saying this to you, but your e-commerce brand might be the next e-commerce brand in 2022, which is going to go bankrupt and which is going to basically shut down forever. And I don't know about you, but me personally, I've already gotten my tent, my accessories, and I've even chosen a spot outside in my neighborhood to put up my tent where I can live in peace on the streets. Joking aside though, 2022 is a very unfortunate year for e-commerce, and not just e-commerce, but basically the entire US economy and the entire world's economy. As a result, things are just going insane, and most e-commerce store owners really don't know what's coming up next for them. But by the end of this video, you're gonna know exactly how your e-commerce brand could potentially go bankrupt if you don't follow the techniques, if you don't follow the strategies, which I'm about to be talking about in this video. But before we do any of that, let's kind of rewind a bit to know exactly what I'm even talking about and why I'm being so negative. Trust me, I don't like being negative like this. I'm more of a positive person, at least most of the time. But with the economy and specifically with what Shopify, I mean, if we look at Shopify news just recently this past week, Shopify stock sank about 14% after Shopify itself fired 10% of its workers. The platform that 99% of you are using to run your e-commerce brand just fired 10% of its workers. That should kind of tell you exactly what's going on. But if it doesn't, here is the next news. So I already covered this in one of my past videos, but Amazon's Q1 earnings in 2022. If you can see, there's a lot of talk right here about how everything has gone negative with Amazon. In fact, cash flow decreased by 4.1% to $39.3 billion with Amazon itself. And the overall loss, which is a very big situation, was a $3.8 billion. Enough to scare you and make you want to live in your mom's garage once again. But that's just the unfortunate case with e-commerce. And if we weren't done with that yet, here is a full-on news of the US Census Bureau, which was just released recently, and it just kind of gives an illustration of what's happening with the overall retail and e-commerce sales as a whole since the beginning of time. So basically since 2013 when they were recording the data. So we saw a very steady increase since 2013 with sales overall. The red line is the not adjusted one and the blue line is the adjusted one, but it doesn't really matter what you look at. You can see there was a steady growth over time, and in 2020 with whatever happened, it was a great year for e-commerce. Even for me, I've released a lot of videos on my channel going over how I did during this time period. But after 2021, things kind of started to dwindle down, and as you can see, first quarter of 2022, things are not looking good at all. In fact, we're back to the level that we were at during this time period, which was before 2020 in terms of overall retail sales, overall e-commerce sales. So these three sources should let you know just the trajectory of where we are headed when it comes to e-commerce. Now we can kind of minimize these three sources and say that these are just more related towards the bigger e-commerce brands. They don't necessarily apply to us small e-commerce store owners or even mid-sized e-commerce store owners. Well, let me just show you an example of a live Shopify store of a client under my Google Ads agency, Euro Marketing, which if you're currently doing around $30,000 or more and you're looking to preserve profits, possibly scale with your e-commerce brand with Google Ads, go on to my website at euromarketing.com and book a free call with me to see how we can make that happen. But that's exactly what this e-commerce brand did right here. So first things first, if we look at last year for this e-commerce brand, it absolutely crushed it with Google Ads mostly. It did over $4 million in sales. There was a time period when it did $470,000 in the month of March, and in November it did $546,000. It just basically crushed it. Now, come to 2022, things aren't looking too good for this brand. As you can see, it's on a downward spiral, but most important of all, it's only done $1.3 million in sales, and we're right now in July, so we're halfway across the year. Things aren't looking too good. In fact, this store might do a little shy of $2 million in sales, which is over a 50% decrement since last year in total revenue. Now, I just signed up this store this year. We haven't even really begun working on this brand yet, but just looking at this kind of overall trend, and it should concern you as well, because if big brands like this, and by the way, this is a Shopify Plus store, one of the big brands, and today so far in sales, it has done $4,800. So ever since we began, by the way, just doing minute back end changes, things are looking just a little bit better. But even then, sales are not really fully consistent as they were previously, and we're not anywhere close to where we should be in terms of the projections. But this is just the overall trend of Shopify right now. This is the overall trend of e-commerce. And let me tell you, first of all, what kind of brands are 100% going to fail during this time period. Now, don't panic if you notice yourself kind of classifying your brand in between one of these things, which I'm about to say. The fixes are not that difficult. Number one type of e-commerce brand that's 100% gonna fail during these rough time periods are those brands with low shipping times. Right now in 2022, consumers are definitely buying less, but they don't have time to play around. They're already in a bad mood because maybe they got laid off, maybe they work for Shopify and they're one of the unfortunate 10% of the workload that got laid off, or maybe they just don't have enough income coming in. So these people are not really in the mood to wait, to kind of sympathize with your shipping times. They just don't care. So what you want to do is you want to make sure your shipping times are fast, they are custom, they're not too slow, because the brand that's gonna fail is that brand that still offers 14 to 21 day shipping times. Number two brand that's gonna fail is a brand with products that people are not searching for. It doesn't matter how successful you are with Facebook, with TikTok. If you're already not on Google Ads, you're already kind of making your way towards failure. But also, if you're already on Google Ads and you have a lot of products which people are not actively searching for, you are bound to fail sooner or later. Number three category of people or e-commerce store owners that will find their brands failing very, very shortly are those people with e-commerce stores relying on just one source of traffic. That's right. If you're just using Google Ads, if you're just using TikTok, if you're just using Facebook, pretty much say goodbye to your Shopify store or your e-commerce brand in general, because that's what's going to happen. Costs are going through the roof. In fact, if you do a little bit of deeper research, you will notice that with Amazon, despite having lower sales, they actually spend 20% more on ads, which is just leading to their overall net loss. So you definitely don't want to be one of those e-commerce stores which are just relying on Google Ads or TikTok or Facebook for majority of the traffic. It is extremely risky for you to continue doing that. If there has not been a wake-up call for you yet, consider this your wake-up call. I mean, I can kind of find like a little bell and hammer to bang the bell and hammer next to your ear consistently so that you understand that it is not a joke anymore for you to just rely on one traffic source. I know it's very just a laid-back approach to just focus on what's already working for you, but that's not gonna cut it in 2022 and onwards. You gotta make sure you're focusing on other types of traffic sources. The next kind of brand, which is 100% gonna fail, is that brand with a marketing team or just somebody handling marketing who's kind of just doing it by themselves, who have no idea what to do, but they're just doing it. Now, if you're already kind of thinking to yourself that you might actually be one of these e-commerce stores where you have a very bad marketing team, or your marketing team is just a bunch of random people working from India, working from Europe, or working from any other country, they're just kind of following the textbook, they don't really know what to do, or it might just be you personally handling your own ads and you don't know how to kind of go forward with your ads, you want to go onto my website at yourmarketing.com, especially if you're already doing $30,000 or more in sales. And if you want to scale further with Google Ads, just book a free call with me on my website to see how we can possibly work together. But this is not the time for you to play around, for you to figure stuff out on your own, because again, this is the time period where you have to preserve your profits. Otherwise, you're just going to go down the wrong rabbit hole. So make sure you are not one of those people with bad marketing teams, or just you doing all of the marketing with Google Ads specifically all on your own, just trying to figure everything out just to save a few bucks, because trust me, you're gonna end up losing a lot of extra money as a result. But the next kind of e-commerce brand which is 100% gonna fail is that e-commerce brand which is not providing any kind of personalization, any kind of customization to its customers. So first things first, I just want to show you guys a very quick example of a brand which I worked with last year when it comes to customization, because this brand does it really perfect in terms of how they have laid everything out. And it is this brand right here called sono.co.uk. In fact, I released a case study of this brand on my website, yourmarketing.com. You might want to check that out. But as you can see right from the beginning, they have everything that is very, very custom, from the trust badge to how we get to choose all of their different variations, to how their upsells, downsells are, to what kind of experience I have once I click the add to basket button. everything is full on customized. And by the way, this is a full on Shopify store, and it doesn't matter if you're a Shopify store, Wix store, WooCommerce store, you need to be focusing on customizations and personalizations in 2020. Because if you're one of those e-commerce brands where you're just using a free theme, you're just trying to find ways to get by, it's not gonna cut it with Google Ads, at least in 2022 and onwards. You gotta find a way to stand out. And that brings me to the next point of e-commerce brands which are gonna basically fail in 2022, and it's those e-commerce brands which have low AOVs. I mean, if we look at Zona right here, the lowest product you will find on their brand is this product right here, which is about 130 pounds. So everything else is above 130 pounds. Some of them are 100 pounds, but they're not necessarily advertising Google Ads for these products. They have these beautiful Trustpilot reviews, very custom, very unique. Majority of Shopify stores don't even do this, but their AOV, because of this, well above a 200 pound to a 300 pound limit. And that's what it should be if you want to really kind of make it with Google Ads in 2022 and onwards. But we covered a lot about what kind of brands are gonna fail in 2022 and onwards. Let's now start talking about exactly how to ensure your brand is not one of these unfortunate brands that goes bankrupt at the end of this rough time period. So first things first, you gotta start off by cutting off unnecessary costs. And no, your advertising expense, your marketing is not an unnecessary cost. A lot of e-commerce brand owners, for whatever reason, decide to cut off their advertising during this time period. That's not an unnecessary expense. In fact, you should be spending the same or even more during this time period than you were doing before. So when I say unnecessary costs, I'm actually referring to all of the costs which you don't really need right now, which are contributing to the increase in the overall revenue and the sales for your e-commerce brand. So things like certain customer service activities, things like having a professional designer for your website, or just other things which you don't necessarily need right now. Focus on eliminating those so you can spend more on ads, so you can spend more on finding the right kind of marketing agency. And there's a freaking fly here. But like I was saying, focus on advertising more during this time period because you need to be spending more and more money, and you need to be kind of preserving your profits rather than diminishing those and just kind of floating by, because this is the time period when your e-commerce brand needs that exposure right now. And this is the time period when it doesn't really need all of those fancy jobs which you have kind of, or all of those fancy staff members which you already have added to your store. But in addition to that, I know it's hard to focus and to kind of keep on going with your e-commerce brand, especially if you're probably losing money right now, but focus on the bigger picture. When you're really seeing this, maybe you're watching this video in Q3, maybe you're watching this video in Q4, focus on the bigger picture, focus on yearly revenue, focus on monthly revenue, rather than focusing on the day-to-day or the week-to-week revenues. In fact, I also recommend you focus on quarterly revenue. So if you're watching this during Q3 and Q3 is not so great for you, focus on Q4, aim at making that the best Q4 ever, instead of just whining about how you did 2 days ago in sales or how this past week has been. Make your view a very broad view, because that is needed to get through this rough period during 2022 and onwards with this recession. But in addition to contribute to that bigger, broader view, focus on adding more inventory that's gonna help you do better in terms of the quarter. So in the next quarter, maybe if you're watching in Q3, focus on adding products which can help you do well in Q4, or look at products which can be possible trendy products in 2023, 2024 and onwards. So it's all about having a very broad picture and understanding what your niche, what your customers need, so that you can prepare for it beforehand. But in addition, whatever you do, customize your approach fully. Does your customer want you, or does your customer need you during this time period? And I can guarantee you, those e-commerce stores where the customer actually needs them rather than the customer wants them just for their own benefit is the one that's gonna do well. Because needing you is like me needing water, me needing food, me needing resources. People are gonna approach my e-commerce brand very differently than an e-commerce brand like that's selling, for example, very fancy newsletter services or very fancy dog or cat subscription boxes, etc., where they don't necessarily need those things. They can cut them off. So those are the businesses that are gonna suffer the most. So if you have the potential of adding more products which people need rather than they want, make sure to focus on that during this recession time period so that you don't end up having your e-commerce brand fail. But in addition, run your ads strategically. Again, you have a lot of resources out there for you that can help you do this. You can hire somebody like, for example, my Google Ads agency, especially if you're doing $30,000 or more in sales and you want to keep that going, if you want to increase that during this time period. Again, my website is yourmarketing.com. Book a free call, but run your ads strategically. focus on scaling your profits. Don't focus on scaling your revenue, because that's not really gonna be fully possible in 2022. I mean, even Amazon faced a lower revenue quarter during this year of 2022. So you want to keep that in mind and focus more on your profits. But I want to end this video off by saying, do not focus on downscaling your major processes. Your major processes include things like sourcing, things like advertising, things like customer service. Those things are what are going to contribute to your consistent sales. Those things are going to make sure you keep on going. Don't go crazy, try to undermine them and try to cut off their cost because you're in panic mode, because you're trying to cut off your expenses. There's better ways to cut off expenses. Shutting off your major processes and systems is not one of those. But again, keep on going. This is the time period when you need to absolutely crush it, when you need to absolutely be consistent and not give up, because those e-commerce brands which get through this time period are the ones that are come out to be very, very successful during this rough time period and after the rough time period. But if you found any type of value in this video, destroy that like button and destroy that subscribe button, and I will see you in my next video.